Bloody Benders, America's first family of serial killers. The hammer always struck true. In the flickering lamplight of their Kansas inn, the Bender family had perfected the art of murder to a theatrical science. A guest would sit at their table, back to the canvas curtain that divided the room. Kate Bender, the family's dark star, would engage them in conversation, perhaps offering to read their fortune or demonstrate her spiritual powers. Then, as their attention fixed on her ethereal beauty and mesmerizing words, the hammer would fall, wielded from behind the curtain with mechanical precision. In the heartland of America, the Bloody Benders had transformed hospitality into an assembly line of death. The story of the Benders begins like many American tales, with immigration and opportunity. In 1870, John Bender Sr. and his family arrived in Labette County, Kansas, claiming a 160-acre plot of land near the Great Osage Trail. But unlike their neighbors who came to build, the Benders came to destroy. The family presented a strange quartet to their frontier neighbors. John Bender Sr., around 60, spoke little English and emanated a brooding hostility that kept others at a distance. His wife, Mary, was often described as the she-devil, a squat, powerful woman who spoke only German and seemed to radiate malevolence. Kate Bender emerged as the family's public face, and what a face it was. Beautiful, charismatic, and in her early 20s, she styled herself as a spiritualist and healer. She gave public lectures on spiritualism in nearby towns, advertising herself as Professor Miss Katie Bender, claiming supernatural powers and the ability to cure illnesses. The Benders built their inn on a strategic location where the Osage Trail met their property. It was a simple wooden structure divided by a canvas curtain one side, serving as the family's living quarters, the other as a small store and inn. They sold supplies to travelers and offered meals and lodging to those passing through. Their killing method was ruthlessly efficient. The guest would be seated at the table with their back to the curtain, positioned over a trapdoor that led to the cellar. While Kate engaged them in conversation, drawing their attention forward, one of the male Benders would slip behind the curtain with a hammer. There, Mary Bender would finish the job if necessary, slitting throats with practiced efficiency. The family worked together like components in a well-oiled machine. Each had their role, Kate as the lure, the men as the killers, Mary as the cleaner. They stripped their victims of valuables, buried the bodies in their apple orchard, and sold the victims' horses and wagons in nearby towns. But what drove this family to such coordinated savagery? Modern psychologists might see in the Benders a unique confluence of shared psychopathy, a folie à famille, where each member's dark tendencies reinforced and amplified the others. Kate's spiritualist performances suggest a natural talent for manipulation and deception. Her public lectures often focused on free love and women's rights, radical ideas that both attracted attention and provided cover for her more sinister activities. The family's origins remain shrouded in mystery, clouded by aliases and contradictions. Were they actually a family at all? Some evidence suggests that John and Mary weren't married, that Kate might have been Mary's daughter from a previous relationship, and that John Jr. might not have been related to any of them. The very nature of their familial bonds may have been their first and most successful deception. Kansas, in the 1870s, provided perfect hunting grounds for predators like the Benders. The post-Civil War period saw countless people on the move, seeking new opportunities in the West. Many travelers carried their life savings with them, making them tempting targets. Kate Bender understood how to exploit this environment. Her spiritualist act was perfectly calibrated for the time, when the Civil War's massive death toll had sparked widespread interest in spiritualism and communication with the dead. Some victims might have been drawn in by her famous spirit writing demonstrations where she would write messages supposedly dictated by the dead. The family's killing spree might have continued indefinitely if not for the disappearance of Dr. William York, whose prominent brother, Colonel Ed York, had both the resources and determination to investigate thoroughly. When Dr. York vanished after leaving Independence, Kansas, his brother traced his route to the Bender Inn. The colonel's initial visit revealed nothing, but his persistent inquiries and the growing number of disappearances in the area began to create pressure. In the spring of 1873, a neighbor noticed that the Bender's Inn was abandoned. The family had fled, leaving behind a scene that would shock even hardened frontier lawmen. Investigation revealed their killing method, the trapdoor, and eventually the bodies buried in the apple orchard. The discovery transformed the Bender property into a macabre tourist attraction. Thousands visited the murder farm, taking pieces of the inn as souvenirs. The apple trees where victims were buried were stripped bare by souvenir hunters. The search for the Benders became one of the largest manhunts in frontier history. Vigilante groups and lawmen followed leads across multiple states. Kate's striking appearance made her especially memorable, leading to numerous reported sightings, though none were confirmed. The psychological dynamics of the Bender family continue to fascinate. They represented a dark perversion of the American frontier family, turning domestic virtues into instruments of death. The inn, traditionally a place of shelter and hospitality, became a trap. Kate Bender in particular embodied the contradictions of her era. She advocated for women's rights while participating in brutal murders. She was both a product of her time and a monstrous contradiction of it. The Bender case influenced American popular culture in lasting ways. It contributed to the Gothic frontier tradition in literature and film, where isolation and wilderness provide cover for unspeakable crimes. The idea of evil lurking behind a respectable facade, of hospitality masking murderous intent, became a recurring theme in American horror. The physical traces of the Benders' crimes have largely vanished. Their inn is long gone, the orchard where they buried their victims has returned to prairie, and the Great Osage Trail is now a modern highway. Yet their story continues to resonate, perhaps because it touches on something fundamental about American identity, the tension between civilization and savagery, between appearance and reality, between the promise of reinvention and its potential for evil. Modern true crime enthusiasts might see in the Benders precursors to family-based killing teams like the Manson family or the Sawyer family of Texas Chainsaw Massacre fame. Criminologists might study them as an early example of organized serial killing, noting their methodical approach and business-like efficiency. Historians see them as representatives of the dark side of frontier opportunity, where isolation and mobility could serve murderous ends as easily as honest ambition. The Benders remind us that evil often wears a beautiful face and speaks with a charming voice. Kate's spiritualist performances, with their mixture of sexuality and supernatural claims, seem almost quaint today. But her ability to manipulate desires, both spiritual and physical, to transform natural human longings into tools of destruction, remains chillingly modern. Their ultimate fate remains unknown, adding a final layer of mystery to their blood-soaked legend. Did they escape to Mexico? Were they killed by vigilantes who kept their vengeance secret? Did Kate continue her spiritualist career under another name, perhaps reading fortunes for new victims? The questions linger, like the spirits she claimed to contact. Today, on the windswept Kansas prairie, where the Bender Inn once stood, the land remembers what humanity has forgotten. Farmers working the soil occasionally turn up fragments of bone, bitter fruit from the Benders' terrible harvest. And some say that on dark nights when the wind blows cold from the north, you can still hear the hammer fall behind the canvas curtain, still hear Kate Bender's voice promising to read your fortune. Though the only future she ever truly foretold was written in blood, beneath her family's cursed apple trees.